Hey, it's Shana Meyerson with YOGAthletica and the YOGAthletica Handstand Breakthrough Revolution. Today, I'm talking specifically about handstands for serious athletes. Now, do you have to be a serious athlete to do a handstand? Absolutely no. But different types of athletes are going to have different characteristics that are going to make certain types of handstands easier and certain types of handstands almost impossible to achieve. Now, before I start, shameless plug, I do private handstand lessons both on Zoom and in person here in Los Angeles. Just know my Zoom students have the same progress as my in-person students. So if you're seriously serious about learning how to handstand, contact me about privates or about joining the Handstand Breakthrough Revolution. Details are in the description below. Okay, let's get to it. So, athletes, let's think about whatever, the whole litany of athletes. In general, I'm making a broad generalization here. In general, when you're an athlete, there is going to be a trade-off between strength and flexibility. Of course, there are exceptions. Ballet dancers, gymnasts, to an extent, CrossFit people, and of course, the yoga people, right? We have both a strong emphasis on flexibility and strength. That's a unique combination for two reasons. The first one is very, very simple. If your muscles are too large, they will literally inhibit movement, okay? Right? Like if I have a bicep that goes out to here, my arm can't bend enough because it's going to hit the biceps, for example. Okay, so it's going to inhibit movement. But beyond that, big muscles are contracted muscles. If you don't understand that concept or that seems weird, how do I make a biceps big? I contract, right? What we call flex. That makes a muscle big. What makes it small is extension. Now, if you think of the word extension, extension is very similar to the concept of stretching, right? When we stretch something, we extend it, okay? So if you have big, bulky muscles, it means that your muscles are basically locking in a compressed position where they are optimized for strength, okay, but definitely not for flexibility. I mean, if you've ever seen somebody with really big biceps try to do eagle arms, right, Garudasana, like they simply can't do it because their muscles are in the way. Okay, so that's one aspect. The second aspect is if you build strength all the time and you never stretch, your body will become tight because it is accustomed once again to the compression and the ignition of the muscles instead of the extension. So let's take marathon runners, for example. I've worked with a number of marathon runners and even ultra marathon runners. And what happens is they are not the typical like bodybuilders, right? They don't have these massive muscles, even though they are extraordinarily elite athletes. But a lot of them, or at least the ones I work with, don't stretch either. So they don't have muscles that are literally like getting in the way of movement, but what they have are muscles that are so taut and so used to being pushed to their limits without ever the release of a stretch. They get so tight. I used to have a marathon runner that I worked with for years, twice a week for an hour and a half. Okay, so it's 3 hours a week of yoga. And I'm telling you, his forward bend was somewhere around here. That was his maximum because his hamstrings were strung like violins. Okay, so we need to take that in mind. Now, let's talk about a different kind of athlete. Now I'm going to talk about the athletes who do make flexibility a priority, okay? The yoga people, the gymnastics people, the martial arts people. For them, because they have the gift of flexibility, they're going to be able to do different types of entries, right, into a handstand than somebody who is constrained by the limitations of their movement. Does that make sense? So the more flexibility I have, the more movement I have, the more range of motion, I'm going to be entering differently. So I just want to break down today what is going to be the optimal entry, okay, if you are a more muscly athlete, or what's going to be your optimal entry if you do have the gift of flexibility. Spoiler alert, a lot of what I teach and most of what I teach on this channel and on my Vimeo channel and even in the Handstand Breakthrough Revolution is for the people who have the capability for deep flexibility. For those people, the ideal entry is going to be starting from a standing split into either a kick, the lightest kick possible, or a press. Let me explain. So if I am thinking of entering into a handstand and I'm quite tight and I can only bring my bottom leg, let's say this close to my hands, and I can only lift my top leg, say this far. Okay, I have very limited mobility. In order to get a handstand, this foot's trajectory is going to have to go from here all the way up to here. Okay? My lifted leg is going to have a similar trajectory, right? It's going to have to go from somewhere around here all the way to here, which means that I'm going to have a whole lot of momentum to make that happen. So if I'm tight, I have to kick so hard to get this leg up and this leg to follow, right? I have no choice. I cannot press or lift from here. I'm going to have to kick pretty hard. And what happens when I kick hard is I have no real control. Now, this isn't a dramatization. Folks, I am a handstand expert, and when I kick from this far, the calculation, okay, so I got it that time, but the calculation is a little bit rough because it's such a big jump. Now, understand that speed and momentum are the enemy of control and balance. Okay, the harder and faster I kick up, the more difficult it's going to be for me to nail the handstand. Why? Because I'm moving through the point of entry, right, or sorry, the point of balance like this, right? And I need to find that one space in time that stops here. But if I enter more like this, it'll be so much easier to find that point of balance. Case in point. So let's talk about the flexible person. If my bottom foot is very close to my hands, right? And you don't want to be too close, to be honest. There is a place where if you get too close, it's actually going to start to inhibit your progress. And I take my top leg and I lift it so high. Now how far do I have to travel? Of course, the bottom leg is still going to have to travel all the way up, but notice that it's a lot closer to my hands, right? So that distance is going to be shorter than if my bottom foot were way back here. However, my top leg is up here. How far does that foot have to travel to get to balance this far? So how much momentum I'm going to have to need to go from here to here versus from here to here? And the answer is little to none. So If I'm a beginner and I want to get into a handstand, this top leg now does not have to go very far. All I really need is a little tiny hop to find vertical, and the second leg can follow. Now, of course, this is a very overly simplistic explanation of getting into handstands. My point today isn't to teach you how to get into handstand. I have a million videos that will teach you that. But today, I just want to explain why certain handstands are going to work for certain athletes and different handstands are going to work for others. Now, that was the beginner version, okay, working with vast flexibility, the flexibility of a ballerina, of a karate expert, of a yoga person. Now, once you get really, really skilled so that you have both the flexibility and the strength, and I have to be honest, this is a relatively rare combination because you really have to work hard on two sort of contrary efforts, right? Because strength literally means flexion and stretch literally means extension. So you got to really work hard on both. But eventually, you want to get to the point where there actually isn't even a hop. If I have a big enough split and I'm high enough on these bottom toes that I can get my leg high, I no longer have to hop. I can just lean in, right? And the pose sort of creates itself. Now again, that requires a lot of upper body control and a lot of flexibility in my legs. Okay, so if you are the bendy sort of athlete, that is going to be your ideal entry. And just so you know, the Handstand Break the Revolution focuses on that one. Now, do you have to be that bendy to have a full split to get in? Absolutely not. But two things. A, you can build flexibility if you really set your mind to it. And B, it's okay if you hop. There's nothing wrong with a little hop here and there. In fact, very few people are entering with an actual press. So I promise there is hope. You can get into your handstand. Now, let's talk about the other kind of athlete, the hardcore athlete, the football players of the world, the boxers, the bodybuilders who have a ton of musculature and don't spend a lot of time or maybe any time really stretching. For them, as I previously mentioned, this press handstand, which to be honest is the easiest handstand, is not going to work. There is literally, physically speaking, no way to press up from here. Okay, if you're super tight, there's nothing you can do other than kick hard to get up. Now, can you get up kicking hard? Yes, I proved that before. But I also proved that it's sort of hard even for an expert to stop that kind of a bullet train across your yoga mat. So where does that leave the muscly people? Now, here's something that's interesting because you might draw from my previous statement the conclusion that it means that people with lots of muscles cannot do handstands. Nothing could be further from the truth. Here's what's interesting. Just like there is a general trade-off in our bodies between strength and flexibility, when it comes to balance, there is also sort of a trade-off between strength and flexibility and alignment. Okay, stick with me here. When we are perfectly aligned, like let's say our body is straight up and down, just like it would be when we're standing, take my word for it, handstands become actually easy, like weirdly easy. Why? Because just basic physics. When everything is in alignment, they balance. That's just how the world works, okay? However, when things are like all over the place and my shoulders are here and my hips are here and my legs are here and everything's everywhere, then for whatever lack of alignment there is, okay, wherever you deviate from a straight vertical, you're going to have commensurate strength to make up for the lack of alignment, okay? In layman's terms, that means if you're super strong, you actually will be able to hold a handstand even if you have the like worst alignment in the world, because your muscles will kick in to hold you up in the places where the rest of your body is sort of fighting against you because it's in the wrong place. Now, this is very easily proven if you just go down to Muscle Beach here in Los Angeles and Venice and ask any of those guys, regardless of whether they've ever done a handstand, to do a handstand, and almost all of them could do it because of the law of compensation, okay? Their strength is compensating for the lack of alignment. However, how are they going to get in? They are not going to get in through a split. They almost always come in through a press. Why? Because presses rely on strength and not flexibility. I would say the easiest press is the tuck press. Now I'm going to go ahead and come into a tuck press with like very bent knees as somebody who had really, really tight hamstrings. So this would be like just such a pipe dream for them. Okay, I'm talking about the person who's here in their forward bend. Now watch this. Let's say the most that they can straighten their legs is something like this, okay, when they're this close to their hands. And this is a very, very honest rendition of what you're going to see on people who are incredibly tight in their hamstrings or low back. All you have to do is come into the strength of your arms and your core and keep your knees really tight in, okay? So you don't even have to worry about straightening your legs, and you can just lift. I'm going to keep my knees bent. I'm not used to keeping them bent all the way up. And from there, extend. You see, so that did not require hamstring opening to come in. All it requires is strength and alignment. So now, all of a sudden, I don't have to have any of that split. I don't have to have any of that opening in my hamstrings or low back, and I can just press up, sort of like an upside down push-up, but not really like an upside down push-up at all. I don't know why I said that. Okay, now, there's also sort of like a middle point for someone who's pretty muscly, but not like so muscly that there's no way for them to straighten their legs. And that is going to be the straddle press. Now, why would a straddle press work better than like a kick-up press for somebody who's tighter? Because the straddle press, think about it. If I want to touch the floor, let's say I'm this tight. The more I open my feet, the closer my hands are going to get to the floor, right? Just by definition. If I were to go all the way into a split, right, my arms would, I'm not going into a split right now, I'm not even warm. My arms would be on the floor by default, like they'd have no choice because of the length of an arm and the height of my body off the floor. The wider the legs, the more forgiving the pose. Now, when you're pressing into a straddle press handstand, now any press is going to be strength dependent. Let me just go on record as saying that, okay? So keep that in mind. But let's say I'm here, I'm pretty tight, quite tight, but not quite this guy, okay? So if I could take my feet, I don't know, let's say just wide of my yoga mat. There is a point where if the legs get too wide, it's going to start inhibiting you instead of helping you. So let me go on record saying that. But then I turn my feet in a little bit, and I have a straddle press handstand video that explains this. And my feet could be wider, okay? You don't want them, again, too wide because there is going to come a point where it starts to inhibit you. But again, now I don't need a tremendous amount of flexibility to reach the floor. right? And there's some people who might prefer to jump out. I would not necessarily recommend that. Because if you use your strength, once again, and I'm not going to give, you'll have to go to the video for the instructions on this, but if you use your strength and you lift up, right, then you can come in without having to have the insane flexibility of like a really high standing split, right? And I could come down also to the same place. Does that make sense? So just quick review. If you're super muscly, you're going to want to learn the handstand through the press. The straddle press would be for people who are moderately muscly, and the tuck press will be for the people who are super muscly. If you're a more flexible athlete, you're going to want to come in through the standing split. That means either a little hop if you have less upper body strength, or the press if you have more. This is Shana Meyerson with YOGAthletica in Los Angeles, California. Please contact me if you want to master your handstands, and I will get you in. Whether that means privates in LA or on Zoom, whether that means joining my Handstand Breakthrough Revolution, which is a 15-hour course plus support, or whether that means signing up for my Vimeo channel that gives you full-length classes that will build the strength, flexibility, and balance that you need to master not just handstands, but honestly, everything in your yoga practice. So many options. They're all in the description below. Thank you. Namaste and happy handstanding.